One of the fastest growing sports in the world is the game of touch football, which is now played in 60 countries around the world. The game as a weekly competitive set of fixtures was first introduced in the South Sydney district around 1968. How it wasn't until its introduction in Brisbane in 1973 that it took off in Australia. I'm Steve Haddan, and I'm here with Jim Schaumberg, who was responsible for starting the game of touch football in Queensland. You're here to tell us how it all came about, but firstly, where are you from, mate? You're from Pittsworth?
Pittsworth in the Darling Downs, Steve. Yeah, Pittsworth boy, born and bred. I left there when I was 20 and moved to Toowoomba for a few years. Had about 3 years down on the Northern Rivers in Lismore with a business, and came back to Brisbane in 65. And always in the carpet industry most of my life, and started off as a country lino layer in the country and ended up as a carpet manufacturer.
How did you become involved in touch football in the beginning?
Yeah, one of the companies that I dealt with when I had a chain of retail stores was Gel Dye. A lot of the older listeners would remember them as a manufacturer of carpets, and bedspreads and dressing gowns, that sort of thing. The family, Macaloon family, I became quite friendly with. Vince, the patron, was the man that put Cronulla into the New South Wales Rugby League in 1967. He was the patron of Cronulla. And him and his son Vince Bernie became firm friends. And so I spent a bit of time with them down there, especially when grand finals were on and any other major game. They always got me into the member stand with them. And their staff, I became good friends with them. There was Johnny Galt, he was one of their main sales managers there. Bob Dodd, who later became my business partner up here in Queensland. Noel Gallagher, a 68 Kangaroo, and many others there. They all played touch in a small suburban competition, and spoke about it often. And I thought, wow, because I was into jogging at the time. It was a bit of a craze in the around 70s, 1970s, so forth. And so I thought this might take off in Brisbane. I wouldn't mind doing it from a fitness point of view. So I knew Gary Balkin. So I used to drink over at his old Melbourne hotel with a mate of mine from Toowoomba that drank there, that lived nearby, moved there, and I got to know Gary. So I spoke to Gary about a meeting, and things didn't move too quickly, and after some agitation we finally got a meeting going. Gary organised it, and it was held over at Brothers Corbett Park, and there was Frankie Mellett, was there, Des Condon, Vincey Morrison, a good friend of mine who was along with me when we started McGregor Roos, Bob Bailey, who was one of our players, and at that meeting in 1973, 29th of March, the first officials elected were Gary was a non-executive patron. I was, for the first 5 years, nominated as the executive chairman, and Bill Cameron, executive secretary. Bill was a Manly boy and had played touch in Manly, so he was a good conduit for us. And so from then on, I contacted the boys in Sydney. Was Bobby Dykes and Ray Vorden. They were the two men that were running the game down in Melbourne. It was a South Sydney competition, South Sydney Juniors. They played at Centennial Park. They had 20 teams. 21 actually. The 21st team was a team of trustees from Long Bay Jail, made up the 21st team, and they had been playing way back since 67. They were the guys that actually started it, and they were very helpful in giving us all the information that we required from time to time.
So when were the first official matches played?
Well, the first competition matches was played at Davies Park and Corbett Park, 1 and 2, and a field at St Lucia. There were 10 teams, and I think I might have them listed here. I'm not sure whether I did that or not. But anyhow, there were 10 teams, and we played for the Melbourne Cup. It was a lovely big trophy donated by Gary Balkin, and Sharps Valleys and Redcliffe Dolphins contested that. And
who won the game? Who were the first premiers? You remember?
Pretty sure it was Redcliffe Dolphins.
And the Boz Electrics Summer Cup, 5 years in a row undefeated.
Well, that was my
Who
team,
won that?
McGregor-Roos, the Summer Cup. We Boss Electric stands for Bullock and O'Shea. They were great supporters. Donny played as well. He was an ex-Brothers player. And they donated that cup. It was a lovely big trophy. And my team, the McGregor-Roos, we didn't win it the first year, but for the next 5 years in a row, we won that trophy undefeated, which was quite a feat, to do that, especially in those days, because in the Summer Cup there was a lot of very, very good players and different teams that just joined for the summer, because it was a nighttime fixture and they didn't like the drag of every Sunday morning sort of thing, but they were often stacked with very, very good players out of the BRL. So to do what we did was a pretty good feat,
So you've got a local comp, so to speak. People are becoming basically interested in this as a means to keep fit and a means to play some level of competitive football. Where did the spectacular growth begin? What caused that to germinate?
Well, I figured that right from the beginning I knew that we were onto something, and I thought, well, if we can get the word out there. We didn't have any money, of course. There was no money. There was, any money that was found, I usually tipped the can myself. So what I did was I rang the boys in Sydney. I said, let us bring two teams down, and we'll play two of your best teams, and that'll give us a measure of how we're going, because they'd been playing for, at that stage, probably 5 or 6 years. So, and we'd been going at that stage about 3 months. So we were always on a flogging to nothing. And it was hard to get people to come about because we had no money to pay for the airfares and the hotel. So we had some money. They had to kick the can for the rest of it. And I always joked that we picked the team on availability, and that was pretty much the case.
So you've got interstate matches and intercity clashes. Tell us about the idea of Queensland teams coming down to New South Wales to kick that along.
Yeah, well, they down there, they put up a trophy called the John Haddan Memorial Trophy, and that was a young English boy that came out and settled in South Sydney and played league over there, apparently, as a young fellow, and he'd only been playing with them for about 6 or 8 months, and on the field he had a heart attack and passed away on the field. So he's a very popular young fellow, so they made the memorial trophy to him. So that's what we played for in those early years. I don't know where that trophy's gone now, but we held it for the most of the time. We got a flogging that first time we went down there, and when the following year, 74, they brought 2 teams up, but I had the ability then to pick who I wanted. Here we were. It wasn't a matter of travelling anywhere, so I picked a red-hot side, 2 sides. And I got Donny Lancashire to referee. Yes. And
local test and grand final referee.
Absolute. Probably one of the best referees I've ever seen in the game. And
who were some of the players?
Oh, well, the star of the night, actually, you wouldn't believe it, was played in the middle, like as a 5'8", was Desi Mannion. Now, Desi was
the Great Valleys 5'8". Right.
Desi was played in the middle in
former
league.
Valleys captain.
Yeah, but he went to prop forward as he put on weight and made a good success of that too. Daddy's not with us now, I believe, which is sad. He's a lovely man. And he just blew them away in the main game. And they had test players.
So who were some of the players that they had?
Well, there was Ray Brannigan and from Manly, and Kenny Irvine, and the list went on. There was, I can't recall them all now, but there was at least 5 or 6 internationals in their team.
Very well-known names.
Oh, yes, and in both sides, and we had an almighty storm in the middle of the game, and there was a big crowd.
Where was the game played?
Corbett Park.
Yeah,
under lights.
What about when you were down there? Where did you play when you?
Erskineville Oval we played.
Yes.
Yeah, I played in the seconds there on that day, and there was hardly anybody there, just a few of the wives and so forth. And but they were very good to us down there. They took us back to the South Sydney Juniors, and we had a put on a banquet for us.
So you got who won the first interstate game down there in Sydney?
I think the scores were something like in the first it was 10-2, and I think
to New South Wales. And then what about when you got up here to Corbett Park?
Corbett Park, we beat them both games, hands
Beautiful,
up. Yeah.
beautiful. And the rest is, I guess, the rest is history. If you show that these are in the days of Queensland struggling to beat New South Wales at anything. So
That's right.
This first year, what 1974 that is, yes?
74,
so
that was,
74
yes,
you
yes,
beat them,
yes.
and that would have generated that's where we get that incredible generation of interest, yes?
Yeah. I think I was involved in it for the next 5 years, and I think they only beat us twice in that time. And that was, usually played 2 games.
So you got games in Sydney. You also got Toowoomba, Ipswich, and the Gold Coast as well.
I arranged those games because, as I started to say, that we had to get some publicity about the game. So I went to the Courier Mail and I spoke to Davis. What was his? I think it was
Harry Davis.
Was it after Harry? What was the guy that was he? Davis. Anyhow, John Morton and others. We got involved, and who wrote out. Laurie Kavanagh, of course, wrote out articles, and they had an amazing effect. Because the league pages were always well written, and columns, and so from there, first association that I was involved with was Toowoomba. John Pobar, who a very, very good Bulimba Cup player.
Yes.
In Toowoomba, and John and I married cousins, so we were already pretty good mates. And he got involved with and Billy Cameron and I went up and chaired a meeting with them at Gold Park in Toowoomba, where the ex-international Ronnie Proudfoot was manager at the time. Anyway, we got them started up there, and it went like gangbusters up there. They were able to get good publicity in the local Toowoomba Chronicle, etc. And then I had a store in Townsville, and so I travelled up there frequently. I had an office up there, and I knew a guy up there from ex-Longreach bloke, Graham Gordon, who was interested in starting it up. Had spoken to me. He'd seen the publicity, so we got them going. On to Cairns with up there, and the same thing happened there. And Ipswich, of course, got involved down here. We had intercity games between Toowoomba, Ipswich, Gold Coast.
So what do you think was responsible for this growth? Do you think it was just that people took to the games? Was it girls as well? Were girls playing at this particular? They came later. So you've got all men playing touch at the time. But was this a means for? Was it essentially a means for young people? What ages were playing the game?
Well, the reason it got started in the first place was what they had in Sydney was you had to be over 25 and not a current player of league or union or any other active sport that would give you a bit of an edge on, from a physical point of view of anyone else that's possibly retired, or you didn't have to have a league or union background to play it. You just had to be someone that wanted to throw the ball around and have a bit of fun. So that rule applied here, and we were approached by a group of young fellows that came along to an early meeting in the first year and wanted to join, and they wanted to have an open age limit, right? And I put it to the meeting, and the meeting overwhelmingly said no, because they feared at the time they'd be older blokes that retired from footy chasing 20-year-old blokes or 18-year-old blokes, which that's the way they saw it at the time. So I was obviously on board with that as well, but the meeting overwhelmingly said, no, we don't want young people in the game. But in hindsight, we didn't know, nobody knew the growth was going to be like it was. I defy anybody to say at that time that it was going to be so popular, because when it started to grow, it just went like that.
So you've got this framework, you're starting to play games right across Queensland, and New South Wales is growing their game as well. What was your involvement with Brisbane Rugby League chairman Arthur Sparks?
Well, what the meetings were getting a bit unruly as the game grew, because you could send a delegate, and we invited a delegate from each team in the meeting. So we had a room full of people that were all very keen to get their name in the minutes for one reason or another. And the meetings would start at 6 o'clock, say for argument's sake, we'd hold them at the old Melbourne Hotel, and we were short for room there. We moved around, and I was getting home at 10:30, 11 at night, no dinner, nothing, just discussing things that could have been, with a good committee, could have been sorted in 20 minutes or maybe a bit longer in the worst case scenario. But these things were, somebody had to throw another spanner in the works and another spanner in the works, and we're getting nowhere, and you'd find that you'd come to a resolution, and you didn't know what the resolution was going to be. So I said at the meeting, I said, look, if I want to move on next year as chairman, I said, we're going to have to change this. We're going to elect a committee, and anybody from any club can give us, a certain number of days, weeks, whatever, notice in writing that they want to attend the meeting and air a grievance, or as long as they tell us what it's about, so the committee's got time to look at it in the meantime. And that worked really well, but of course we wanted somewhere a little bit better than the hotel. It was going to be knocked down soon. There was talk of that. So I approached Arthur Sparks about it, and I wondered how he'd receive it, because he might have seen it as a threat to rugby league, but he didn't. He was very warmly received, and offered us the use of the BRL boardroom for our meetings, which we had for many, many years. And he was very, very keen on sponsoring and having any involvement he could in the game of touch. I think he saw it as a feeder, because it was mostly at that point ex-league players playing it, so that was in his favour as well. But no, and also then the World Cup was coming up, 1975.
That's a touch World Cup.
No, this was the
Rugby League World Cup.
League World Cup, yes, in 1975. And the game that at that early stage was at Lang Park was England versus Wales, and so he suggested that we might be able to put on a demonstration game, which we did. So we got a lot of regular touch players who were playing then, but we also got a lot of other names like Mickey Vivers and Mickey Retzlis and so on, and spiced them into both sides. And I told the boys at the beginning of the game, I said, throw the ball around and never mind too much about the touches, if you can let the tries be scored, because there was a big crowd there. And this was the curtain raiser to the England-Wales game. Billy Cameron and I were up in the box, and we commentated on the game and explained the rules as we went along. And the game went down really well. There was a lot of applause as all the tries were scored and so forth. And I remember Wales beat England that night 12-10, and the famous little Davy Watkins scored 3 tries out of blinder. It was a big night.
What are some of the interesting results of games during your time as president?
Yeah.
The McGregor-Roos are mentioned.
Yes, I had a pretty good side. We won lots of premierships, and in the McGregor-Roos.
Who was in your team?
Sorry?
Who was in your team in those days?
The only notable player was Frank Drake.
Frank Drake, great fullback for Australia.
Probably
Test
the
fullback.
second player I approached to come and play with the club as I formed the club in 1972. So
you're name dropping now, mate. It's very good. To have these people playing touch would have been fantastic.
He was very good at it. I played in the middle with him for 20 years, and people used to say, "Gee, that must have been great playing with Frank in the middle." I said, "It wasn't really, because you couldn't follow him because you didn't know where he was going. So how did you know where he was going?" But he was a great player and scored lots and lots of tries. And I can remember a lot of the young people in the early days say, "I got the old fella, old Bally, Frank," but they didn't. He evaded him many times. But anyway, I had one of the current Queensland rugby union players playing for Brothers. Was one of my employees, Jeff White. And I suggested that after training, and we trained on Wednesdays nights, always, and that we play their champion side. They'd won the grand final, and full of Paul McLean and Barry Lestrange, and just a whole list of Mickey Cox. They just had a whole list of internationals, and in the team. Anyway, we went to Crosby Park after we trained and they trained, and we played the. To be fair, we'd been playing touch then a couple of years, and they hadn't. Different game, and compare a fast touch game to rugby. There's a big comparison, big difference. The type of game you're playing. Anyway, we beat them 8-2, and but all had a good time, and that was just one of those type pickup games that we had there.
1983 over 35s, a long-running grand final. Tell us about that. You've made mention of that here.
Yeah, well, in 1983,
we're jumping ahead here.
Yeah, my over 35 team played Wynnum Manly for the main trophy that year in over 35 competition, and we played it at East Juniors over there at Carina. And it was a very hot Sunday. I think we'd only started the game at about 10:30 or something like that, and it was very, very hot. And
when did you play your seasons? They played during winter?
Winter season, yes. Okay. And then you had the summer comp over up till Christmas after the grand final in, October-ish sort of thing, September, October. Then went for about an 8-week summer comp. But this was the grand final in the main winter competition. And so the two best teams in Sydney, in Brisbane, we played each other. Anyway, it was extremely hot. We went for 30, what did we play in those days each? 35 minutes each way, wasn't it?
It's like football.
Yeah, 35 minutes each way. And 3-3, okay? And everyone's absolutely knackered. So I hadn't long been a while since I was president, but anyway, their man came over to me and said to me, what are we going to do? And I said, well, we'll have to play extra time. So we played an extra 10 minutes each way, and it's still 3-3. They had a very good team. They were all ex-Wynnum players, Desi Valentino, Georgie Baldacchino, and just a whole heap of them that had all been ex-Wynnum players. Anyway, so it's still 3-3. So coming out, I said, what do we do? I said, well, let's give it another 5 each way, see how it happens, So it's still 3-3. No one would give in, It's a bunch of old heads. So it's still 3-3. So we went again for another 5 minutes each way. And it's still 3-3, so their official, I don't recall who he was now, but came over to me and said, well, bugger this, this is too much. What do we do? I said, I think it's unprecedented, but I think we'll call it joint premiers. So that's the way it remained.
Good result, I think.
Joint premiers.
In the end, the Crest Hotel Sydney trip has come into the annals of history for its significance.
Yes. Yeah, well, that was
tell us about that.
That was the second year we went down, and the third year would have been.
Is that
yes.
the crest in the
Jack,
cross? Is it?
Yeah, the crest. Alan David was on the committee of the New South Rugby League. Friend of my business partner, grew up together. Anyway, he owned the crest. So I happened to mention to him when we were down there a month or two before that we were coming there. He said, "I'll stay at the crest. I'll give you a really good rate," which he did. So. That's okay. So a friend of his was manageress of the place, and I said to her when we all checked in, I said, look, what about security here? Because we're in King's Cross, let's face it. So, and I had an entourage of some 18, 20 people, and so that many rooms were involved. So security-wise, she said, well, why don't you put it all in the one room, and that sort of cuts your risk back, I said, well, good, put it all in my room, okay. And
put all what?
All their gear, all their gear, all their personal and everything, because we're heading out to Port Hacking, where we played on the Cronulla Rugby Union ground, that interstate game that night. So everything's gone in my room. Well, you can imagine when I left it, there was overnight bags and ports and clothes hanging up. It was just like a clothing store. Okay, so we go out there. We had a win that night out there, and we get back to the hotel, and the boys had, had a few drinks and so forth, and went out different places and so forth. Most of them stayed together. Anyway, when I got back to the room, right, got back a little bit early. I was a bit concerned about all the security and that. Here's this guy. I go up and get the key. They give me the key. I go up to the room, and here's a guy, a drunk, and he's fully clothed, snoring his head off, lying on the bed, which was my bed, with all the gear all around him everywhere. I don't think he would have even known they were there, you know. So
he's just found a room that's open so he can have a snooze.
I don't know.
Maybe
He must have got the room wrong and just said, "I'll give you number 5," and they gave him the key. I don't know how it happened, but that was a funny thing on tour.
So you've covered a game in its infancy. What are some of the current statistics? Where's the game at the minute?
Well, recent figures I've been given by the association now. In Australia, there's 400,000 affiliated players with Touch Football Australia. There's 500,000 children participating in school programs, and Touch is among the top participant-based organised sports in Australia.
Fantastic.
It's right up there.
What a great story.
The Metropolitan Touch Association, I should...
that's in Brisbane.
That's the main Whites Hill Association, and it is the largest in Australia as an association by a long way. Have 13 fields at the White Hill Reserve at Camp Hill, 6 fields at Fairfield, and in that comp alone, in that association, there's 900 teams annually that play, 300 junior teams in that, and 10,000 registered players annually at that association. 7 permanent staff, including 2 groundsmen. Fixtures conducted 5 nights a week for 2 seasons a year, and the Cobras Cup attracts elite players from the Gold Coast, Ipswich, Toowoomba and the Sunshine Coast. So it's grown to be a massive association. I should go back, and I didn't mention the number of people in the early days of the forming the association. There were many good committee men that, in many cases, haven't been recognised. There was the original committee people like Bill Cameron. John Ellingson came on board very early days. His secretary used to look after the minutes. I remember him sending his workmate across to me at Wollongabba, where my office was, with the minutes to check them out, and that was none other than a dual Queensland player in Peter McWhirter was the young office boy. He used to bring over the minutes.
But having his start in fashion, because that's what John was. That's what John was doing back then.
Right, he was
not only a great surf lifesaver up on the Sunshine Coast, but he loved his rugby league, and he was also in the wholesaling of clothing.
He was.
Which is where Peter still is today.
Also on the first touch team to Sydney as well.
Gosh.
John was. And he's still around and still doing well, still involved in the surf club up there. People like Ross Kratzky and Vincey Morrison, those people involved in the early days, and it wouldn't have happened without them, because I couldn't do the work involved in it, obviously, myself, and these blokes were hands-on and really loved what they were doing, and they were very good at it.
Now, Jim, you've made special mention here of an interstate clash in Sydney and some interesting refereeing. So are you complaining about referees again, are you, mate?
Yeah, one of my pet hates.
Yeah.
Well, that was played at Centennial Park, which is the home ground at that time of the South Sydney Juniors big competition, and so that was 1976, and I was a manager. Paul Pliers was Pappy was the coach that year. Mm-hmm. He did coach 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
Yeah, ex-international, and anyhow, they had a stack side. They really had a lot of good players, especially their speedy bikes. Kenny Irvine, Ray Brannigan, Reggie Haddan, Bobby Keys. They were all Australian champion beach sprinters, Newtown players, and that's long time ago. They weren't in their prime, but they weren't sped forces either. Those guys looking very fit. They maintained their fitness very well. And to look at the side when they ran out, I thought, oh my God, this mob looked pretty good. We're going to have trouble here. So I think
full time the score's 6-6.
It was 6-6,
and the ref played on for 7 minutes despite calls of time from the sideline.
Well, I had my trusty Tag Heuer chronograph on it, stopwatch, and there was no time out for injury or anything like that. You just played on the 35 minutes. And it got to full time, and it was 6-all, and the ref kept playing. So even some of the South Sydney people were saying, it's time as well, because it was one of their people was standing fairly close to me, and he was onto it as well. And I think
the referee was the timekeeper, was he? Essentially.
No. Well, he had his watch on it, obviously. Yes.
There's no full-time siren or anything.
No. We didn't have the luxury of that. Anyway, it kept playing, so we're calling out, time. So it kept on playing. Anyway, it was I think it was 7 minutes over full time, and the Blues managed to score, which made it 7-6. But it was on the 8th tackle that they scored. So they were guilty on 2 occasions. So when with the presentation of the trophy after it was there, the John Horden trophy, there it was on the table with a nice white cloth on it sitting there, and their president down there, I think it was Ray Vorden, presented the trophy to us, and I put the captain up there, which was Wayne Daly. Not with us now anymore, Wayne, God bless him, to receive the trophy, and their captain to receive the trophy, and he accepted it and made a little speech and put it back on the table. Kenny Irvine came along quite deliberately, picked up the trophy, came over to me, and handed it to me and said, "Here, Jim, this is yours." He was out on the field when it happened. He was still playing, Ken. But a great sense of fairness. So that's the way.
Lovely gesture, a magnanimous gesture from the Cockroaches, mate. Rarely seen.
Yeah,
but good, but good. You organised games as warm-ups prior to the Sydney trips between 4 Brisbane Rugby League A grade sides. So you've got in the mid-70s. Of course, you've got Brisbane Rugby League at its very peak.
It was.
The interest in the district competition here in Brisbane was through the roof. Record crowds at Lang Park. Of course, you're growing this growing game, touch football, but you got some games against Easts, Brothers, Norths and Souths, famous clubs.
Yeah, well, I contacted them and
they would play a representative BTFA side, Brisbane Touch Football Association.
Well, this is the same team that I'm talking about was involved in that game in Sydney. And there was Wayne Daly was the captain, Greg Lawson, Australian beach sprint champion.
Yes.
Darryl McCarthy, he was a McGregoroo, very fast. Bobby Lee, Johnny Carroll, David Adams, ex-North player, played for North Davies.
Yes.
Mickey Daly played for South. Tony Chittenden, very fast, he was a McGregoroo. Ray Black. Now, Reg was a bit like Desi Mannion. He was a roly-poly 5'8", but a very good ball handler.
Ball player,
he was very good, Blackie. Russ Gulliver, he played touch in Sydney. He was transferred up to Queensland, and he was a McGregoroo. Terry O'Brien, I think he was a teacher at down the Bayside there at a very quick little bloke. And Johnny Milner, another McGregoroo, who was also very, very fast, John. And we played East first, A grade, over at East at Langlands Park, and we beat them 13-3. That was the biggest flog we put on anybody.
So what year was this? What do you remember?
This was 76.
76.
Yes.
So I think East made the grand final that year.
They might. I think so. Yes, I think so.
They did, didn't they? Didn't West beat them that year?
Yeah. I think it was 75 or 76. It was. Yeah. We couldn't get the A grade side. I can't recall why now, but we played Brothers B grade side, which interesting. We drew them 7-7, 7-all. North, that was an interesting one. Tommy Bishop was around those days. He used to work for us, actually, Tommy. Anyway, that one we beat them 10-4 over there at Bashop Park. And South A grade, we played Tommy Berry, I think.
He was the coach. He was English, wasn't he?
English. Yeah. Tommy had us tied at that time. And we beat them 11-4. They had a crack side, the South.
Yeah.
They were around the mid-80s, as you know. They won a premiership. And
Then you went to Toowoomba.
Yeah, Toowoomba. Yeah, we beat there. They had a crack team with a lot of sprinters. Alan Risman, those sort of fellas,
Yes.
were all in the team. We beat them 9-5. On Toowoomba, we also played a Brisbane team. We went up and played a curtain raiser against Toowoomba with their nighttime knockout competition as curtain raiser to that at Newtown Oval. There was a big crowd there that night. It was good. We beat Brisbane Toowoomba that night too. Actually, that was just wasn't my team. That was 3 or 4 players in my team and a bunch of other guys that I put together that were happy to go up and be involved in that. And we had, as the original team got older, there were a lot of young guys coming through, and they became eligible for over 35 as well. But they were younger than over 35s. We were pushing 40. They were like, younger guys. A very good team, and they actually won the club championship, Australian club championship.
The McGregor's A-grade team.
Yeah, down the Gold Coast, down there. But the Boss Electric Summer Cup, as I mentioned earlier, that was donated by Donnie Bullock and Mick O'Shea, and we won that undefeated for 5 years, undefeated. Had some close games, but we never lost a game. The teams we beat were the Aspley Devils, the Melbourne Magpies, that was Gary Balkin's team over there, the Orana Panthers, All Whites and Wavell Squash. They were a couple of other teams that we were able to win that, and we did win that again different times. It wasn't just those 5 times we won it. I think we won about another 3 times, I think, from memory.
By 1987, there are 2 associations operating in Brisbane: the Brisbane Touch Association and the Metropolitan Touch Association. Now, what's transpired there?
Well, I said earlier that we were approached by these young guys to join our association, and in our wisdom at the time, we rejected that application. And the upshot of that was they started up their own association, which was all ages. And at that particular time, 1987 it was, the president of the Brisbane Touch Association, Reg Barr, approached Brisbane City Council about leasing a reclaimed landfill site, the rubbish dump at Whites Hill Reserve, Camp Hill, for use as the headquarters of touch football in Brisbane. Because there were 2 major touch associations operating in Brisbane at that time, Brisbane Touch Association 120 teams, and the Metropolitan Touch Association had 180 teams. They had exponential growth through the fact of their open age. There was no age limit, so they had great growth, where we were still limited at that point to over 25. Anyway, the council was reluctant to land a grease to one association. Reg approached Peter Ridgewell, who was president of the Metropolitan Touch Association, a rival in the Brisbane touch market, and proposed that both associations amalgamate with a view to obtaining a lease of council land at Whites Hill Reserve. Peter canvassed his members and agreed to the plan and amalgamation. Brisbane Metropolitan Touch Association, the BMT, was formed in 1987, with Peter being appointed president and Reg and Vince Morrison as vice presidents. In 1988, Reg obtained the lease of 4 fields, later expanded to 7, at Whites Hill Reserve, and Sunday morning fixtures started in March of that year. Reg then obtained government grants for BMTA for irrigation, floodlighting, a clubhouse at Whites Hill Reserve, and that was a wonderful effort from all involved there and that was really the significant reason why that association is now the largest in Australia, because of that, having those grounds, those fields, and the management of the whole thing. And Reg take a lot of credit for that, for the growth.
It's a remarkable story, and you have much to be proud about from a. There's no greater thing you can do for people in life than giving them an opportunity to play sport, to get out with their mates and get together, and it's a great story. Touch football is played by so many people, isn't it? There's so many areas. Kids play it, schools play it, girls now playing. It's no wonder it grew. No wonder it grew, because it offered you the opportunity to play footy, but not get beaten up.
That's the whole story,
all the time, and that's what lies at the heart. So you have you and the people that you collaborated with on this. You've got much to be proud of. I'd like to point out that in 1924 you were given the honour of presenting the annual 50-year anniversary cup to the winners in perpetuity, and the inscription, if I may read it, on the trophy reads as follows. Jim Schaumberg is recognised as the founder of touch football in Brisbane. In 1973, he scheduled the meeting at which the Brisbane Touch Football Association was formed and was appointed chairman of the committee. Jim assisted a number of cities and towns in Queensland to establish touch football competitions, and he arranged and participated in the first Queensland versus New South Wales touch football match. Jim was also a founder of the successful McGregor's Touch Club, and since 1983 he's been a life member of the BMTA. Great story. Thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much.